So just came back from Gaza, and I'm going to speak today about a very acute problem that I see in the media about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and about the specific conflict in Gaza. Something that really puzzles a lot of people, something that comes up in many discussions with pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian groups, and no one gives the answer. I'm going to stress the problem, the question, and then I'm going to give as clear an explanation as I can. So the problem that many pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian people try to grapple with, mostly pro-Israeli people, they always pose this question, is that today there are many ongoing wars. For example, the Sudanese civil war, in which, according to some estimates, around 100,000 people were killed, more than 7 million people are internally displaced, and there are also, in this specific war, there are also a lot of accusations of crimes against humanity. For example, here about sexual violence, that 4,400 people were gang raped by different groups, and many humanitarian workers were killed, and there is a lot of death in there, especially of civilians. This is the Sudanese civil war, something that is still ongoing, and the casualty rate and the people displaced there and the horrors committed there are much larger than in Gaza, if you even accept completely the whole Palestinian narrative. Also, the Syrian civil war, which right now has about 600,000 people killed, and half of them civilians, almost 7 million people displaced, and there are also a lot of accusations of genocide and the violation of human rights, and also much of chemical weapons used there, things that are very, very horrible, much worse than what happens in Gaza. Also have the persecution of the Uyghurs in China, a Muslim group that lives in China, and according to Wikipedia, the attack type is forced sterilization, forced birth control, forced labor, torture, brainwashing, alleged rape, including gang rape. The birth rate of the whole country decreased by almost 10%. People are sent to forced education. 16,000 mosques have been razed or damaged. Something really horrible is happening to the Muslim population in that part of the world, in China, and I think it's much worse than what happens in Israel and Palestine. This alleged persecution of the Muslims in China, and no one talks about it. No one even knows what's going on there. No one cares. The Yemeni civil war, which according to Wikipedia has around almost 400,000 people killed overall, almost 100,000 Yemeni children dead from starvation, and 4 million people cumulatively displaced, and also, again, alleged crimes against humanity there. The US is involved there, the Arab League is involved there, the Islamic State, ISIS, is involved there. The humanitarian situation there is much worse than in Gaza. In Gaza, no one dies from starvation, but in Yemen, apparently, many dies. And war crime accusations, there are a lot of war crime accusation going on there, again, about raping and murders and executions, and how children and women are being impacted, and really no one really cares about it. No one talks about it. It's just under the rug. They just sweep it under the rug. The Myanmar civil war, for example, another part of the world where there are about 60,000 people killed, and another horrible war that happens around the world, and there is an ethnic conflict there, and each side is accusing the other one of ethnic cleansing. Another horrible conflict that is even worse than what happens in Gaza, but no one even knows about it. No one really cares. The Tigray War in Ethiopia, for example, another horrible conflict that is ongoing in the last years. And in this conflict, there are almost 1 million refugees. There are almost 100,000 people dead, and also accusations of rape and murder and ethnic cleansing and all of that. But no one in the West gives a shit. No one really cares about all of these much more horrible conflicts that happen around the world. So why do people are so unaware of these much more horrible conflicts? Why they don't go outside and protest? Why no one really in the West really knows about these things, but they really know about Israel, or at least they say that they know about Israel and the Palestinian conflict, and they come outside with flags and things like that. We can also see, for example, in the universities, we can see here a student that goes with her hands tied like she is under arrest, and she has the pride flag, the LGBTQ flag, and then she rips her diploma, and she has this Palestinian kafia on her. This whole symbols that she is attired with, they all speak volumes of what these people believe. None of them did even something slightly similar for the Sudanese civil war, then the horrors that happens there, for the Syrian civil war. All of them, by the way, the United States provides weapons to all of them. The persecutions of Uyghurs, this is not a case where the United States provides weapons, but again, something horrible that happens that in the East, and she doesn't seem to care about it at all. The Yemeni civil war, again, the Americans provide weapons there. Myanmar, likewise. The Tigray war, likewise. And she never even once stated anything about it. This student doesn't care about it, but she really cares about the Palestinian plight. Likewise, a student here talks about, when she gets the diploma, about her responsibility as a student.
The bare minimum as a proud Palestinian woman through and through. I urge you all to acknowledge the class of 2024 of Gaza. That no longer exists. Students that will not be walking their stage this year, and 14,000 children who will never walk a stage ever again. Celebration without acknowledgement would be an injustice on behalf of my people. And to my fellow graduates, as many of us are future healthcare professionals, I urge you all to advocate and go against the grain when advocating for human life. I urge all schools, including UIC, to divest from companies complicit in constructing genocide.
Okay, so she also has this little amulet on her neck, which shows mandatory Palestine, and she means that it all belongs to the Palestinian people. There shouldn't be any Jews in it unless the Palestinians allows them to be there. And she speaks against companies, and how companies in the United States, how they are really responsible for the high death toll in Gaza, and people shouldn't really support these universities that provide students and money to all of these companies. She never did something like that, and no one really cared about the Americans providing weapons to the Sudanese civil war, to the Syrian civil war, to the Yemeni civil war, to the Myanmar civil war, to the Tigray war, which had much more death toll than in Gaza, in like 10 times more. So she is a Palestinian, so I get it why she really talks about it, but the whole crowd like, oh yeah, we know about it, yeah, go for it, and no one talks about the other atrocities that happen around the world. So why such a thing happens? How all the pro-Israeli people are asking the Palestinian side, pro-Palestinian side always says, children are dying, I don't care, children are dying, everything around the world is horrible, but right now I'm fighting against this. But why the whole of the American population, many of in Europe, why they so care about the Arab-Palestinian conflict, but they really disregard all the others? It's a question that really is repeated again and again and again, but no one really is willing to give an answer. I am willing to give an answer or an educated guess about why it happens. So to understand this conflict, let's go back again to this whole student, the whole charade of the student ripping her diploma. You can see that the symbolism of the act that she is doing, the way that she is attired, can really speak volumes about what this whole conflict is about, why people in the US and Europe are so agitated about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they don't give a shit about the other conflicts. Now, the main reason why people are so riled up for Israel or against Israel, for the Palestinians or against the Palestinians in the West, is because in the narratives that the university, especially the people in the left and the right, they try to explain the conflict, they try to make it their own. So, for example, the LGBTQ movement and the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole socialists group that are against capitalism, against the imperialism, the involvement of the West, how they see it, they really take whole of the conflicts in the world and they try to adopt some of them to their cause. So when they look at the Sudanese civil war, the sides that fight there are Sudanese. They don't really care about them because there is no one side that is depicted as this demon, this capitalist and a patriarchal imperialist force in their imagination of their meta-narrative of the world. Likewise, the right. When the right looks at this war, it doesn't see this and two forces that fight. That one of them is this woke, anti-values, anti-conservative force that tries to make the world into a lunatic piece of hell. And this is why they don't care about this conflict. Human lives is not what at stake here. There is no one side that really cares about human lives, not from the left and not from the right. People in the Western world, whether it's in England or in France or in the United States, Australia or in Canada, when they go to the streets to demonstrate against Israel or for Israel, they don't really demonstrate against Israel or for Israel, but for this whole agenda that they have, their imagination of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which they try to adopt into their demented worldviews, meta-narratives about the world. The world is just divided into two sides. There are the lefty loonies and the right fascists, and this conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, really raises their awareness to the larger conflict in the world that they imagine between these demons and angels that fight for dominance over the world. Each side has its own different demons and angels. So when we talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, somewhere around the late 60s, early 70s, which also corresponds to the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations in the United States, Israel became, the narrative of the Israel-Palestinian conflict became very much adopted by these two sides as Israel as this white, capitalist, patriarchal, whatever force that fights against the diverse, non-white, socialist power that the Palestinians represent. Of course, this whole imagination, this fantasy is completely bogus. There is no even one single thing in it that can resonate with the truth. Like Jews are white. I don't know, like 60% of the people in Israel, they are from the Middle East. I mean, their families from North Africa and Syria and Iraq in India. But somehow the whole narrative, the Palestinian narrative that the leftists really adopted, says that all Zionists, let's call them that, are from Eastern Europe, or perhaps from the United States and England, which is demographically speaking something that is completely bullshit, but still they believe it, and they see the Israeli or the Zionist effort to create a sovereign state in Israel as some form of colonial endeavor, colonial enterprise, even though in colonial studies everyone knows that there is a colony of a superpower, and this colony is dependent on that superpower and always comes back to that superpower, which is completely bullshit when you try to compare it to Israel, because in Israel all the people who came from Eastern Europe, for example, they hated Eastern Europe. They didn't want anything to do with that. The people who came from North Africa and Iraq and Syria and Egypt and came to Israel in 1948, they really hated the places they lived in because they were persecuted in them at this time. So, and they severed every connection they had to this place. Economical and cultural connection to this place. Almost cultural, it's a bit different, but still. Also the Palestinians, as these natives. Are the Palestinians natives to this land? Many Palestinians came from Egypt, from Lebanon, from Jordan, from the whole wide range of the Ottoman Empire in 1917. Did they have the whole of the place? Jerusalem, for example, had a majority of Jews since the late 1800s. So what happens here? Who this land belongs to? Who are the natives? So you see that when you look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, trying to make the Palestinians as this group that represent the anti-colonial, anti-imperial, anti-white, pro-LGBTQ and anti-patriarchal, which by the way the Arab culture is completely patriarchal, but still, to view them as this good guys in the left mind necessarily makes Israel as this imperial colonial, especially since Israel since the 60s is really much dependent on the United States as this extension of American imperialism, which is, by the way, not exactly true, because Israel and the United States has a lot of disagreements about their status here, what should happen, and what is their purpose here. Almost every Israeli would tell you that he is in his ancestral home, and he doesn't want to make as much money as possible to bring back to the United States because he doesn't have any connection to the United States. But still, in this narrative that the Palestinians really try to weaponize, many people in the West adopted it. They tried to look at their own fight against the patriarchy, against the conservatives, as, or vice versa, or as a fight against the wokes and things like that. They tried to adopt the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into this, which is really is far away from the actual reality of life and historical reality of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as possible. But still, they don't care, because they look at the world as meta-narratives of this good guys, these bad guys, and everything in the world must adhere to it. If it doesn't adhere to this worldview, then we don't care about it. So there can be like almost 100,000 people killed in the Sudanese civil war, almost 1 million people killed in the Syrian war. The Uyghurs can be killed and persecuted and being sterilized. We don't care about it because it doesn't serve any purpose in our meta-narrative of these good guys against the bad guys, in our meta-narrative of the left and the right around the world. And I've also seen some, I can't find it right now, but I also seen some students, pro-Palestinian students and also pro-Israeli students, which are not Jews and Arabs, which is more intimate, more personal, the conflict. When they're asked about why they're here, then they don't give any answer that has anything to do with the actual conflict. They say, we are here because the university is taking our money, and because people are the patriarchy is trying to fool us, and the media is ruled by the wokes. And well, this is not what the conflict is about. This conflict is very personal between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it has nothing to do with your demented worldviews of the world as this DEI or as this fascist hellhole. Nothing about it. It's not about left and right. It's not about the patriarchy or the LGBTQ against the patriarchy, or the left against the right, or conservatives against liberals, or colonials against anti-colonials. It has nothing to do with it. If the people in the West would just hammer this into their stupid heads, perhaps then they'll try to look at other conflicts like the Sudanese civil war, or the Yemeni civil war, or the Tigray war, the Myanmar civil war, and then they would pay more attention to these much more deadlier and horrible conflicts. So this is all in all my explanation for why the West is so into it. And both sides, by the way, also had other larger forces that try to boil the thing, to make it look more important for people in the West. Of course, if the Chinese, for example, try to portray this in their media, in their many talkbacks, in their bots, if they try to, or the Iranians, or the Emirates, or I don't know, the Islamist states, if all of these, or Russia, all of these anti-Western powers, if they try to elevate this conflict into a war between the evil West and the good guys that are not Western, then of course the West would try to see it as such. When you open YouTube and you see like hundreds of videos that explain how horrible this conflict is and give you videos of poor children and casualties and things like that, they gloss out horrors that happen that cannot be connected to the anti-West effort, the West against the anti-West war that is going on, at least in this meta-narrative. So China and Russia and other states that have a hell lot of people in them, and hackers and people that are tech savvy, they also try to push this narrative and to highlight this conflict as such, as a conflict between colonial and anti-colonial war, which is not. And this also happens from the other side. People in the West that are very much, that have this worldview, they really try to highlight this conflict as a colonial against anti-colonial struggle to push their own agendas. And this is why when you open YouTube and you see Al Jazeera, CNN, Fox News, other big media conglomerates, you can see that they push this narrative. They always connect it to, look at how bizarre this woke is. Look how demented these pro-Islamists are. They try to rip this conflict from its historical and geographical boundaries and really portray it as this example par excellence of the war of the East against the West, or Western Morris against Eastern Morris, which is something that the West today is really much struggling with. So this is it. I hope you all have some understanding now about how zombie-like are the protesters, how they are from both sides, how most of them, if they're not Arab or Israelis, which is more personal, how they are brainwashed to believe that this conflict is more important than any conflicts in the world. It's more horrible than any conflict in the world, because it is not, but because it is trajected into something that is much more meta-narrative, something that the world itself is really structured around. And I hope you won't be as stupid as you were yesterday. Think about it.